Good morning, everyone. Good morning to the students here in the room. Good morning to those of you online. My name is John. I'm glad to welcome you to our class this morning with Guy Finley. If you're new here for the first time, those of you online, our agenda for today is that in a moment, Guy will give a talk that he prepared for us. It'll last about 60 minutes, and after his talk, we'll take a short break and then come back for a question and answer period, a time for both the students in the room and those of you online to join us in a discussion and ask questions about the material presented and hopefully deepen our understanding of it in the time that we have together. So I hope you'll take advantage of that, and our class will last about 2 hours, and I hope you can stay for all of it. During the broadcast, we hope if you have any technical issues online, please just drop a line, send a note in the comment area on Facebook or YouTube, or send us a comment written in the GoToWebinar question box, and we'll do our best to help you out. Finally, those of you in the room, just a reminder, if you have a cell phone, do check and make sure you've turned that off before we continue. So I think we're ready to start. I'll read the topic and the first key lesson. Here's the topic for today. Find the field of freedom somewhere out beyond fear. And the first key lesson is this. Faith flowers into love. Love is the fulfillment of faith.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning to all of you joining us from wherever you are in the world, whatever day or time it is. I'm glad that you have found your way here. I hope you will stay for the entire session, which actually is only an hour and a half if you wish. The remaining half hour is usually students come up and speak or share their ideas, and while it's good to stay for that, it's not necessary. There is a kind of a conundrum when we talk about this idea of find a field of freedom somewhere out beyond fear. The conundrum is that you wouldn't be here in the room, you wouldn't be watching and listening if you didn't have some part of you that either has sensed in some strong way that there is another way in which you can go through this life that doesn't involve some form of daily terror over something that is threatening or challenging the image you have of yourself. Or perhaps you've actually had a moment where, as if from a mountain peak that you suddenly reached, you can see a distant ocean, an oasis of a kind. And for a moment you realize that there is another world altogether that is within eyesight, but how you reach there is another story, because the moment you leave that moment where you saw such thing, now it's disappeared. You're down in the valley of thought again, down in the valley of imagination. But to be clear, and the reason I'm opening my talk with these ideas is because I want you to understand these talks are not about me telling you about how to get there. These talks have a sole purpose, and that is to share the possibility of a man or a woman setting out on the first leg of this journey home, which always begins with a question they have been unable to answer for themselves, and they have to start exploring it by themselves. You explore the truth, your relationship with the divine, by yourself. It's great to have others. It's wonderful to have a school where men and women of a similar nature can gather for the sake of those discoveries, but in the end, you explore, you discover, or you don't. End of story. And when does that exploration begin? As I said, when I have seen something, when I have sensed something, when suddenly I've had a shock of some kind. When does the addict begin to explore the possibility of ending dependency other than the moment where he or she can no longer go down that road anymore, or has seen the road they're on is created by a consciousness addicted to the sensation of whatever it is, identification. So that wish to explore, it always begins with some kind of silent or strong intuition that an individual has. Some of us come into life with that. I know I did. I came into this life with a very strong intuition that what I could see and touch and feel and all the trappings were in fact trappings. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but it was evident that that world as it was not going to bring me what it is that I could sense I needed to be an individual capable of fulfilling whatever the purpose was that was sown into my life. And to that, you have to say, well, where did I get all these purposes? How did the purpose of my life become to be someone who should be seen in this light? How did the purpose of my life become wanting others to approve of me? How did the purpose of my life become the idea that I should live in a certain kind of home with certain kind of possession? How did I come to that purpose? And the answer is, at least if you've explored it at all, I didn't come to that conclusion at all. I never thought to myself when I was a kid growing up, I should be this, do that, go there, but I saw everyone else being that, doing that, and going there. So what else can I do but emulate, because that's all a child can do. But within the child lives something beyond imitation, beyond the limitation of imitation. Imitation is fear, not a map. And until you understand that you live an imitative life because your purposes are all designed by a consciousness that you came into this world and immersed in, you'll never understand how imitative it is and how much fear there is in that constant process of accepting as true what your purpose tells you must do, as opposed to beginning the process of exploring the boundaries that are inherent in an imitative life. There are boundaries inherent in an imitative life. But we don't know that we reach the boundary of an imitative life, because whenever we reach that wall of an imitative life, everything in us says, don't go here, don't go past that, because you don't know what's beyond that. And imitation relies upon knowledge, relies upon thought, beliefs, ideas, opinions. It requires it. So we have to understand at the outset of this talk anyway, if we're going to find that field beyond fear where freedom waits, that we're going to have to understand, we're going to have to go beyond those walls. Pure and simple. Now we have to understand what those walls are. We have to begin not through intellect, but through perception, direct perception. What is their existence, their purpose? Where do they live? And then once we understand that, we can begin to explore through interaction with those parts of ourselves that we don't know are presently creating this prison in which we live. 8 minutes. Take a nice deep breath. Let's get going. I'm going to involve you a couple times, a little bit like we do on our Wednesday nights, so I hope you're prepared to chip in. We won't spend as much time because there's too much material to present, but it'll be good to have you participate, and that goes for you out there in the web world. When I ask if you would just go ahead on your little screen there and fill in, and then Eric will make sure that everybody sees all of these similarities that are born out of imitation, as you'll see. Nice deep breath. Here we go. What does it mean if we keep having the same unwanted painful experiences over and over again. What does it mean if we keep having the same painful, fearful experiences over and over again? What does it mean? We haven't learned. It would seem evident. But it means more than that. If I keep having the same painful experience, but I keep heading out in all these different directions to find freedom and escape that, then somehow or other, though I don't see it, this thing, this life that I fear, it must be a prison. Fear must be a prison I don't see. You have to at least see it for yourself. Fear has to be a prison I don't see. Now, how would I come to that conclusion? Because it doesn't matter what direction I go in when I feel fear, I run into a cell. I run into a wall. And when I run into that wall, what happens to me? Anybody? I feel some fear. And when I feel some fear, what do? I either try to knock the wall down, and it seems like I might be able to from time to time, but no more do I knock the wall down than lo and behold, there's another wall and it's bigger than the last time. So I run in the other direction, fight or flight, binary mechanical mind. And when I run in the other direction, do I escape my fear? Yes or no? What happens? You're lucky, how lucky you are you have this easy quiz right at the start of a talk. Fear is an invisible prison. But our mind sees the prison as being the conditions that we run into when looking for freedom. Our mind says the prison are the conditions that we run into that deny us the happiness or the joy we say we are due as we head for those things. Do you understand? I don't know, it was a book by G. It's a remarkable journey or men, I don't want to remember. He tells this story about this one village of people that live up in the high mountains in the Caucasus there, about how they have this belief that if you're standing there and somebody draws a circle around you while you're standing there, you can't get outside the circle. And people believe it. They're going to die. Something terrible will happen if you step outside that circle. And he evidenced it, or so it said. I believe it was a teaching story. But the point was what? How can I be held captive inside of a few lines? Do you know that when they, God help us, when they capture elephants and break them, you know how they break them? They start with big heavy chains on their ankle. And for the longest time, the elephant will pull and pull and pull. And little by little, as the elephant acquiesces to its captivity, they take that chain away and they put smaller and smaller things until it said you could hold that elephant there with a small string because it believes so thoroughly in its captivity. You don't know that you believe in your captivity. And the reason you don't know you believe in your captivity is because fear always tells you you can escape, and fear is the captivity, if you can see it. Are we scoring any points early on in the game here? How do I break out of that circle? I have to understand something about it, don't I? For one thing, and it should be evident, that this circle of fear that I live in, it can't exist without the mind that always sees something fear to be afraid of, can it? Can the circle of fear that I live in exist without a mind that not only is convinced it sees conditions that are fearful, but that upon seeing the conditions has fearful reactions and then believes that the reactions are the fact of the matter, so that I am bound by my own reactions to what my mind sees in that moment as being something fearful. And further, can I see something fearful without being terrified that what I see is going to take from me my security, what has made me fearless? So I live in the constant fear of losing what I believe has made me fearless. Can anybody see the circle here? It's a problem if you can see it, but we're going to look at it to understand it with greater and greater clarity. So to begin with, and I was driving here today, and I won't have time to go into this. You know, when fear began, it wasn't always humanity, the true Adamic, the true soul wasn't created with fear. You know when fear began? It's told in the story of the Garden of Eden. Fear began when human beings had knowledge of good and evil, meaning when the mind was divided and could say this was good because it could compare it to evil, or this was evil because it could compare it to good. That's when fear started in human consciousness, in the division in the fall of the mind, which may have been unavoidable, I might add, as the ray of creation descended and descended. But the point is that the divided mind is the father of fear. Now, we live in a world that is a creation of this mind, do we not? Is this world a happy-go-lucky, bright place filled with loving human beings, everybody reaching, extending hands to each other to lift each other out of this morass? Or is this a world filled with human beings, each and every one convinced that they know what freedom is, and anybody that denies me access to the world of freedom that I say is freedom is my enemy, and I will smite thee? That's right out of the Old Testament. I will smite thee. And why will I smite thee? Because you're messing with me. Are you messing with me, or are you messing with the circle I live in? The ideas that I hold true and above all other things. So that every bit of fear is always the onset of some form of resistance to a condition that challenges whatever it is that I have named and desired as freedom, and then set out in pursuit of, coming so close. Haven't you come close to freedom? Come on, give it up, yes or no? So close. But we start to see eventually that this freedom isn't really free at all. I have to pay an immense price to be free. Every day I have to pay an immense price to be free. Got to refresh my spiritual ideas. Got to make a little more money, get a little more secure, make another plan, trust that tomorrow will deliver me from the torment I'm in sitting at home by myself. All of that every single day. Drive. And where are you being driven to? Another moment where you will see that what you were driven to did not deliver you from your fear. Yes or no? It's important that we understand these things. We may not like it, but one day you'll love the fact that you can see the truth of these things. Because for one thing, it'll be love that shows it to you. But let's not go off on a tangent. What other view is there other than through these conditioned eyes? When I say conditioned eyes, you can't condition the eye. The conditioned eye is the thought that says it sees what it does. That is the conditioned eye physically and the conditioned eye psychologically. It is the thought that says, I see what I see. But thought never sees what it says it sees. Thought always sees what it needs to see so that the thinker can be confirmed as an individual capable of understanding what the problems are and how to escape them, so forth and so on. What other view is there? What's beyond thought? What's beyond fear, that field? What is beyond right doing and wrong doing, as Rumi said? What is beyond that? Don't get ahead of yourself. Don't say God, Christ, Buddha, nature. Don't do it to yourself. What's beyond this is a tiny bit of understanding, a little light that dwells in the darkness, that understands. Mr. Howard said it best. By experience, I've begun to learn, and it's been a long lesson, life is not a race to win. It's a school for my higher education. Because if it's not a school for my education, then what in the name of God is this godless place where men and women live purely for the moment when they can have something that gives them a sense of pleasure or allows them to avoid pain? Because that's what life is for humanity. It is an endless race. It is always a race to get someplace, do something, become someone, And every race that the mind creates to outrun its own fear brings with it the fear it is running from. It is inescapable and undeniable. So that though we don't see it, is your life not predicated on some time in the future when you're going to succeed, yes or no? I'm going to become rich, I'm going to become better looking, I'm going to get a six-pack set of abs in another life maybe. Something's going to happen, I'm going to succeed, I'm going to wake up. So that I have all these ideas about what it means to wake up, don't I? And every idea that I have about what it means to be enlightened is a form of darkness. Every last idea that I have about enlightenment is a form of darkness. Even if it's the truest thing that was ever written, if I haven't been involved in the process of being released from this consciousness, then I am a captive of the consciousness that promises freedom in a time to come. And that's where fear is. Fear doesn't exist outside of a time to come. Fear doesn't exist outside of a time to come. And every time to come only exists in imagination. These are important ideas. So now we know a little bit we can see it with our minds, can't we? We have to go beyond that. So if that's the case, where then, if you will, how do I go on to discover this lesson that I can grasp with my mind? I get it. To some extent, I understand that without the idea of time, you can't be afraid. Because time is promise. Promise is always, I don't know. Could be, might not be. And we know that when we go into hoping in things seen, as St. Paul would have said, that the very hope that we have in things seen means that anything we don't want to see along that line is obscene to us and must be resisted at all costs. Yes? Where is this lesson? If no fear exists outside of time and time doesn't exist outside of imagination, do you understand what that means? Time doesn't exist outside of I'm here, I don't want to be here, I want to be there. I've got this, I don't really think this is enough, maybe a little more over there. That's time, isn't it? When I will become what I am not happy with being now, that's time. I'm not spiritual enough, that's time. And all I know is time, because everything about my hope in myself rests in time, doesn't it? So you take away time, what in the name of God is going to happen to me? If you take away imagination, what will I have to look forward to? Please follow this to the first conclusion. What is it that I always look forward to but find? Fear, inadequacy, anger, frustration, impatience. That's what I find when all is said and done. I cross the finish line and another starting gun goes off because I didn't quite get to Eden. I didn't quite make it to the great oasis that something in me knows. You can't take from a man or a woman who has any form of magnetic center, any part of them that came into this world knowing that there is something above them. You can't take that from them. They can kill it in themselves, they can bury it, but it can't be taken by this world. This world in its rightful place actually strengthens one's wish to further explore and understand the part of them that came in realizing this world is fine, but there is something that is not of this world and neither am I. Got it? What's the lesson hidden in the experience of fear? What is the lesson hidden in the experience of fear? Now, maybe this isn't clear enough to you, so now I'm going to bring you in. You ready? Come on down. That was an old game show. It still is on the air, isn't it? Eric, let's bring up the list. What would be one of your most common fearful moments in life? What would be one of your most common fearful moments in life? Now, I made a few, and then I'm going to take it to another level, but let's start with that. How about any sudden OMG, right? That's pretty common. Yes or no? How about, I gotta pull this off. I have to look good again. I gotta try to look good. I have to make sure that people actually believe that I am what I'm pretending to be. Is that not a source of fear? How about any, the negative anticipation? I'm going to go someplace, I've got to make a presentation, whatever it is. Aren't those moments of fear? How about I just have to go to a family reunion? Talk about a moment of terror. So what would be a common fearful moment in your life? John? Any moment I don't understand produces instantaneous resistance. Now, the resistance ultimately has a reaction and it tells us I understand. But the fact is, the moment I face an unknown situation, there is a grip, isn't there? Who else? John? Sudden moment that shocks my sense of self into, well, now what am I going to do? Leah? Yeah, it's a fearful moment. I'm supposed to look good and say nothing but very clever things, and then I say something and I don't see that expression on that person's face I'm expecting. Who else? Chris?
I don't know how to do something.
I'm filled with fear the moment I run into something I don't know how to do. On the board, something says, Hans, I can't handle it. That's a big one, like Chris was just saying. Claudia, thoughts painting the worst scenario. Isn't that a fearful moment? Patsy, having a problem with my children, a fearful moment. Nikki, confronting people I have harmed. Confronting people I have harmed. Confronting them is harming them. Running out of time, that's huge. How about this one for a common fear? What if I run out of what I want? Have you ever noticed that? I know I've seen it prevalent in myself. I get down to a third of a quart of milk, honest to God, and I can feel a certain kind of fear there. What in the name of God? There are people who've never tasted milk. Honest to God, running out of things. How about FOMO? Fear of missing out. Why do you think you rush? Fear of missing out. Who else? Ellen?
Making a mistake.
Fear of making a mistake. And then being defensive and hoping someone doesn't know that I'm covering up. Drew?
Being late.
Fear of being late for a date. Tony? Fear of being wrong. Over on the board here. Fear of being overwhelmed. That's a pretty big one, isn't it? We've touched on that in a number of different ways. How about fear of age? Running out of time. Time to do what? Animate another fear? You need to see it. All right, so I don't want to, I just wanted everybody to kind of get the feeling that we're all pretty much talking about the same thing. For instance, how about the fear of breaking a pattern? Have you seen that in yourself? Especially the older you get. When you're young, you don't really have a whole lot of patterns other than your pattern is just general chaos and mayhem. But as you get older, things kind of get more and more rigid, don't they? More and more pattern-like. What is an addiction other than a form of physical pattern? I'm terrified of breaking not only a pleasurable pattern, I'm terrified of breaking a painful pattern. You don't believe it, but you're afraid of breaking the pattern of fear. And what would be, by the way, afraid of breaking a fearful pattern? Fear. Let's bring up the second key lesson, Eric, please. To live with the perpetual fear that you may do the wrong thing is to do the wrong thing that you fear. How many of you live in the perpetual fear of doing the wrong thing? Isn't that, I mean, when you think about, I'm going to do the right thing, can I think about what the right thing is to do without being identified with it? And if I'm identified with it, I've already done the wrong thing, aren't I? Aren't I? Haven't I? Mightn't I? Did I? I might have. Why is that true? Can you see the fact of that? Why is that true? To live with the perpetual fear, I may do the wrong thing. Like, what if I don't prepare enough? What if I'm not clear when I'm speaking to this person about this problem I have? So the mind, why is that very perpetuating the very thing that you fear? Why is it doing it? Anybody? Why? Because then I do all of these other things to try to hide from myself that. I try to, how many of you know what it means to contrive your appearance? Isn't any attempt to contrive your appearance out of the fear of something that may not be what you want? Isn't trying to contrive appearance the fear doing the thing that you fear? Isn't it an action born out of not wanting what you fear? That was the question. Isn't it contriving appearances? What about rushing? Isn't rushing a way in which I try to avoid the fear of not being where I need to be, of getting what I want? And here's a big one, of do the wrong thing to escape a fear. Have you ever caught yourself lying? You do it all the time, small ways for sure. There's something inside of us that is so fearful of doing the wrong thing that when it does the thing it shouldn't do, then it will cover up what it did. So it compounds the fear. Lie compounds the fear that created it. It's important that you see these things. We're not judging ourselves. I'm just asking if you can see it with me or not. Then who or what in the name of God is going to break this pattern? How is an individual going to go past this pattern that they feel compelled to maintain? Try to see it with me. If I'm afraid, am I not compelled, do I not feel compelled to maintain the very condition that promised me freedom, but now I see it can't? I'm compelled to keep the pattern in place. Yes or no? Isn't an addict compelled to keep the pattern in place? So if I'm addicted to a certain image of myself or demand upon you, and that pattern is not only painful, but it's filled with fear, what in the name of God lives inside of this consciousness that feels compelled to keep the pattern, the prison of fear in place? That's the question. You understanding it? Because we have to find that out, and we have to find out what is that pattern itself. Nice deep breath. Why is that pattern in place? What produces the pattern? I'm bringing you in briefly here. What goes on in that moment when suddenly I run into that wall, I seal this fear? What happens in that exact moment when I run into the as far as I can go? What happens to me? Out loud, please.
Fear that my image will be shattered.
Barbara said, fear the image will be shattered. No, that's what you've run into. When you run into it, what takes place? Why have I run into that?
I didn't want it.
I run from those moments because fear tells me what will happen if I don't run from them. So I run into a fear, and then fear tells me how to escape it. And how does fear tell? Do I think to myself, oh, fear is telling me how to escape fear? Because if I knew fear was telling me to escape fear, I wouldn't do it, would I? So I don't recognize a fear when it appears. That's step one. And how does that fear hide itself in all of these conditioned thoughts and reactions? Fear hides out in any moment where, now listen, it seems like I just ran into this problem. I didn't run into a problem. I ran into a wall, a screen of thoughts and feelings that are projected by a conditioned mind, by my own conditioned past. So I run into a past that's conditioned, a self that's conditioned with it, And then when I run into it, my idea of escaping it is to do what the conditioning that brought me to it did. Sorry for that long sentence, but you need to see this loop. We described it. We said, if fear is a prison, how is it I don't know I'm in a prison? Because when I run into one of the walls of the prison, the wall itself points me in the direction to escape the prison I'm in. And I go so far in any east, west, north, or south direction, only to realize, holy cow, I'm still behind the wall. Yes or no? So we're told by our conditioned past what will happen if we don't run from the moment that we fear, when the moment we fear doesn't exist without the conditioned past. You getting the picture? Transition. Take a nice deep breath. I said it at the start. It's a wonderful, beautiful, sort of all-inclusive idea. Rumi said, somewhere out beyond right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. And of course, indicated in that feeling, in that idea, is that there is a place where it's not bound by right doing or wrong doing. And he's not saying that there isn't right and there isn't painful mistakes. He's saying that right doing and wrong doing are a pair of opposites. That's what that means. Out beyond right doing and wrong doing. Out beyond the mind having fallen into a divided state that divides everything up into good and evil. Because that's the field we live in now, the projection of an unconscious nature that must have good and evil so that I can be good if that's evil and I can be evil if that's good. The mind requires that divided state in order to perpetuate the identity it does, and of course the fear of running into evil. But the evil that I fear, what is that saying? What man taking thought? No. Good or evil? Nothing is good or evil save thinking make it so, right? Shakespeare. All of these ideas are all connected to this, trying to point to a field out beyond the opposites. Understood? So how do we enter into that field beyond the opposites? I hope you can follow all this, because I'm trying to show you something. You see, you and I think, well, I just got to get my mojo, get my giddy up, and get going and get into that field. And that's what I'm going to do, by God. Yes or no? Because that's the kind of person that I am. I'm a doer. And some of us grow up really thinking that. And it's almost impossible to lose. And the only way you can lose that sell all, is when you finally see you're in a flat out dream that is a fabrication of a divided mind that is motivated in the way it is because it's mostly motivated to get away from the conflict of being in that constant crucible of being someone who's going to escape themselves, and you can't do it. You better find that out before you die, I might add. All the teachings say that you must die before you die if you want to really live. Okay, so let me keep going. Somewhere out beyond wrongdoing, right doing, there is a field, right? I'll meet you there. If you want to write something down, somewhere out beyond the mistaken idea that there is ever a good reason to live with fear, there is a field where fear cannot dwell. Somewhere out beyond the whole mistaken idea that there is ever a good reason to live with fear, there is a field where fear cannot dwell. That's a fact. Now, you have to do the work required to realize that you don't enter into a field that has already entered into you. That field is already present. You even have had intimations of that when you've had certain epiphanies, and for a split second, in the fullness of that stillness, in the light of that sudden awareness of where you had been acting against yourself, you are momentarily laid down, and you can see from another order of yourself quite clearly the consciousness that was responsible for that conflict prior to that moment. And in that moment, are you not in a field that is above and beyond the field of that divided mind, yes or no? And where is that field that is there above that divided mind? Is it in time? Is the stillness that John was talking about when he was a boy, was that stillness there and then he found some more later this afternoon? Or is that stillness an enveloping order of energy, of an awareness that was always there through the 9,232 years of John's life that it took to just see that? You understand the point? I know you're actually a little older than that, John. I'm trying to be complimentary. How has that field entered? Now, I have a story to tell you, and it's sometimes the best I can do to try to present to you certain ideas that are intellectual, emotional, and physical so you can get the big picture. I want to bring you in, not just tell you, not just show you, but now involve you in the possibility of seeing that this is a possibility, and it may be the reason I've never learned the lesson in fear. But as you'll see, I'm going to tell the story. I'm going to end it on a cliffhanger. Yep. The old, stay tuned after this commercial break. I'm going to end it on a cliffhanger. We'll cover some ideas, and then I'll tell you how it ends, okay? And it's a happy ending, and it can be your beginning. So once upon a time, a man awakened to find himself in the middle of a desert. And I'm talking about, he opened his eyes and there was, the skull of a cattle laying there looking at it like this. I'm talking about a pretty desolate place. No, nothing, just desert, as far as the eye could see. And in that moment, when he awakened there, he had, what? Where am I? What happened here? Now, let's bring you in. Every character, every scene, every stage in the story are parts of our consciousness. Have you ever had a moment where you have been suddenly ripped out of whatever it was that you thought was reality and beautiful, and there you are waking up with sand in your mouth, meaning the heart is dry, the mind is empty, and all you can see is nothing for as far as the eye can see, because he just said they didn't have pepperoni for your pizza. I'll give you a moment to think about it. The smallest thing, can't it, deliver us into one of these desert-like moments? A little thought can come along and say, you know what, you're like 1,000 years old. You haven't made any progress at all because you saw some anger or depression in yourself. So he wakes up in that field. Now, what's the first thing that happens to you when you find yourself in a field like that? What happens? I got to get out of here. I can't live here. This is impossible. I don't know why I'm here. But by God, I'm not going to stay here because I'm a man who understands. I'm going to gather my stuff up. I'm going to go find an oasis. That's what I need, an oasis. And so the mind pictures an oasis. Dry mouth, wet oasis. Off he goes in a direction. And at a certain point as he's traveling, lo and behold, he comes up on a big dune. And what do you think he sees in the distance? No, more desert. What's wrong with you? He sees an oasis. He says, I knew it. And he starts to head in the direction of the oasis, but he's going up and down these dunes, and he no more goes up and down a couple dunes than he gets to the top of another one, and what does he see? More desert. More desert. And so he trudges on, and you've seen these pictures, and at a certain point he goes up this hill, and just right there, just on the other side, he sees an oasis. Oh, thank God. And he starts to run towards the oasis, but as he starts to run towards the oasis that he's looking at, picture this scene, it starts to change. It starts to morph as he's running towards it. And instead of an oasis, the trees begin to wither. The dates drop from the trees, disappear into the sand. The water that was there gurgling turns into a kind of groaning sound. And he starts to see the most horrible thing in the world, which is not just a bad desert, but a place where everything that he imagines could possibly be wrong is there waiting for him. He sees his own death. He can't believe it. Where did the oasis go? Now, as he's standing there, try to picture, imagine a screen, you're in a movie, and the screen begins to move towards you. So he's not even moving anymore, but now the thing that he doesn't want to see begins to move towards him. And as it moved towards him, it's not just pictures, sounds, movements, energy coming out of it, and he begins to feel an immense fear born out of the very thing that he thought he was running towards. Do you understand the idea? And as it comes closer and closer, what does he do? He hightails it. Do you know what hightails means? I don't have time for that. When a deer runs, its tail goes straight up. That's how the other critters can, so the other deer can follow him. Anyway, he hightails it out, and he starts running in the other direction. I don't have time to go through this 32 times like I'd like to. But can you get the picture that now he's running, and he starts running, and he starts to see a place where he can get away from what's coming to him. And as he gets closer and closer to that, what happens to that wall, that screen? What does he see? Starts to turn into something that's as terrible as what he was running from. And he goes east, west, north, and south. And no matter where he goes, not only does he run into that, but this is what else is happening. As he's doing that, he starts to notice that it takes less and less time for him to run into what he thought he was running toward. And when he was running toward, everything starts to kind of move in and move in and move in. This should sound familiar to some aspirants. Now, he doesn't know what in the name of God to do. What's he going to do? The walls keep closing in on him. And as he sees these things, he continues to try to figure out, set out again and again, how can he find the oasis, the Eden that he saw? And then a certain moment comes in his life. And when that moment comes, and not until that day, does he suddenly, cliffhanger, he finally makes it there. The cliffhanger is how? Ready? Would you like to know how? We covered this briefly. What is beyond fear? What is beyond fear? Those walls representing fear. What is beyond fear? Now, the truth is we don't know, and you mustn't kid yourself. If you say, actually, it'll help you. You say, well, God is beyond fear. Truth, love, all of these things are beyond fear. Well, why aren't you beyond fear if you know that? The God that you say is beyond fear is the source of your fear. That's why it was said, thou shalt have no graven images. Why? Because imagination is the source of fear. Unconscious imagination. And unconscious imagination is meaningless without something in that consciousness identifying with the image. So that the identification with the image, whatever it is first where I'm headed. That's the oasis. But because it is identification with an image, and images are conditional, in the moment that the conditions change, the wall changes, the picture changes, and now suddenly the thing that I thought was going to be my freedom, the Eden, the oasis, is now the opposite of it, and now I'm terrified of what I'm seeing. But am I seeing anything other than the flip side of what I imagined I was headed for? That's all I see, but I don't know I see that, because when I see it, what do? I have a new imagination, I have a new destination, a new plan to be free, and I run towards that. Yes or no? What's the problem with all of that? With that imagination identification scenario? Write it down. Reality always catches up. Isn't that a bummer? Can you imagine a race of human beings who abhor reality because it interferes with their dreams? Well, that pretty much describes it, doesn't it? I think it does. So my fear doesn't exist without what I've imagined will make me fearless. My insecurity doesn't exist without what I've imagined will make me a secure person. Which means that the way in which we try to control the fear of meeting those moments is through imagination. I know you don't like this. I don't really care. You see, your only hope, if you want to find the field out beyond fear, is you're going to have to die to the source of fear. And the source of fear is not the world that you blame your fears on. The source of all of our fears belongs to a consciousness that in order to escape its own conflict creates a heaven for itself where when it gets there in time, it will finally be free of the pain and the fear. So that it's always running towards something, never suspecting what it's running toward doesn't exist without what it's running from. And they are opposites that consciousness cannot see. It creates in itself. And until it sees, it creates the fear that it believes in, then it won't stop creating the imagined place where it will be fearless. They go together. I'm on time. What's beyond fear? Well, we just said it, didn't we? You know, when Christ said, sell all and follow me, and sell everything, and you seek first the kingdom of heaven, all of that business, this is what he was talking about. This is the nefesh. This is what must be sold is me. I've been sold into that desert. Now, don't ask me why or how. That's a dodge. The question is, do I see it or do I not? And if I don't learn the lesson of that, I must find out why it is that I don't learn the lesson. And can you say, anytime that I fail to learn something new and true, if every moment is an opportunity to learn something new and true about fear, why don't I use every moment to learn that lesson? Anybody want to venture a guess? Let me tell you a quick story. I'm going to run out of time. Another story. Here's a college, upper grade, highfalutin, PhD people, big time school, people learning important stuff. And the teacher finally comes back. It's the end of the session, and everybody knows that out of the 7 postgraduate students, only 3 of them are going to be permitted to go on to this next special school. And the professor announces who it is that's going on. And the minute he does, this one man stands up and goes, wait a minute. Bill, Bonnie, and Brad, I know they didn't do as good on the tests as I did. I aced them. Boy, I don't even like this guy. I don't even know him. Do you have that attitude in you? It's disgusting, isn't it? I aced them. Why are they, Bill, Bonnie, and Brad, why are they going on? All those B's, I got an A. Never mind. That's how my mind works. Teacher says, well, listen, bozo. Apparently, when you signed up for this postgraduate work, you didn't see that what I'd written on the board, and you can't miss it. He said, it's still there. What does it say? With some hesitation. It says, 60% of your grade in this class depends upon lab work. And the teacher looks and he says, tell me, bozo, how many lab sessions did you attend? Of course, you know the answer, don't you? Like 2 out of 50. So the teacher says, well, if you didn't attend the lab, how can you expect to pass? Ready? How can you hope to learn the lesson in fear if you don't show up to the lab? The lab's there, isn't it? Every day. Lab work. Every day. In 1,000 different ways. That's why I had you fill in all those little spaces that, the different ways. Fear of not, fear of being. All labs there every day. I go to bed, I'm in the lab, I don't know it because my mind's talking about what's tomorrow going to bring in. About what a failure you were today. You're right, you need a little more knowledge. How can you hope to learn the lesson in fear if you fail to show up for it? Would you agree that you fail to show up for the lesson in fear? You have to agree to it. Don't you dare say you show up. Because I promise you that when you actually start showing up into that lab of present moment, you will begin by being there to learn the lesson in the fear. And the lesson you will learn in the fear is that the fear is not a creation of conditions, but of a consciousness that blames conditions for its fallen state, and then continues to dive into imagination of a time to come when the world will be like it wants you want it to be, instead of you understanding the world will always be a direct reflection of that consciousness until you change that consciousness and enter into the field beyond what it creates. Bring up the third key lesson, please. Whatever may be the welcome appearance of some familiar path, promising to lead you away from a moment in life that you fear, be not mistaken, it is by any other name the path of fear. Whatever may be the welcome appearance of some familiar path, promising to lead you away from the moment in life you fear, be not mistaken, it is by any other name the path of fear. Was there anything in that desert that man could do that didn't bring him to another place? Didn't every time he'd run into a fear, did it not tell him, take this path? And the path was a product of imagination, wasn't it? And every time he ran into the end of that, he had to come up with another path, never knowing that every path that his mind proffered to him was an offering of a mind dedicated to the continuation of the fear, as opposed to bringing it and him out of that field into the freedom that he knew existed, that oasis. Yes? Back to the cliffhanger with 4 minutes left. So there he is. Put yourself in his place. You are in his place. God help us, all of us who have begun to understand something are in that place to one extent or another. Some of us may have learned something. Here he is. This time he's got it. And then all of a sudden, here comes the wall. And as it comes closer, it's not looking like what it's supposed to look like. It's starting to look like everything he doesn't want it to look like. And 100,000 times, and that's not an exaggeration, he's does what when it comes? He's sitting there, and he's thinking to himself, I don't know what else there is to do, but I know I can't escape it. I've had enough living in the desert, enough horrible relationships with other human beings because of my fear they're not approving me or disapproving of me. I've had enough life in the desert of constantly drinking and drugging and doing all the things, the next distraction, the next this, only to find out whatever it was, that when I got there, that wall was still there. You can't escape the fact of that. And at some point, you'll actually understand that. So this is the cliffhanger. There he is. Here comes the wall. He knows his whole life, all he's ever done is run from it. So what does he do? He digs in his heels. You know what that means? He sets himself to die. Because that's exactly in scale what it feels like. Oh my God, my life is over. Oh my God, I'm nothing. I'm nothing. I heard it before that I can't do, that I live. I heard it, but I'm nothing. And he understands that his fear of being nothing is part and parcel with the next oasis, where he will become something that won't be all the time hungry and begging and greedy and longing for people to approve of it or get some crumb of some consciousness that'll make him feel like he's got a little further to go. He's almost there. My mind just started singing a song I wrote 50 years ago. There was a line in it. Gentle inspirations, I want no part of you. Give me revelations, let me know what I must do. Gentle inspirations, I want no part of you. Give me revelations. Let me know what I must do. And in that moment, he had that revelation that he could not escape that wall, because he began to suspect, as we've been describing, that somehow it always looks like what he imagined it would look like, even though he resisted his own imagination. So he dug his heels in, getting ready to die. And what do you think happens as he does that? Here comes the wall, and it gets closer, and it's unbearable. This is the cliffhanger. And then silence. Nothing. Nothing. This is a real experience. You see there, he has no idea what happened. But then he turns around, and the wall that was coming at him had gone through him, and he could see it retreating on its way to find the next victim in the desert of fear. And just to add a little maraschino cherry to this, although you mustn't idealize this, the minute that it passed through, he turned around, it was gone. He turned around, and where do you think he was standing? In Eden, in the field out beyond fear, in the oasis. Now, this is a story in levels and scale. It means that these are definitive discoveries, revelations, that you will then make the mistake of thinking, well, now I know. You don't know. You can only be. But for the sake of the exercise, in that moment, what happens? How many of you know that there'll be some form of fear, the fear of not getting, not doing, blah, 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 yes or no? Fear of being it'll happen. Fear of someone challenging your esteemedness. It's esteamness. Steam, never mind. I wonder what'll happen if I let this moment come and go without interfering with it. I wonder what will happen if I just wait and see whether or not what I think I see is so. That's what it means to dig in your heels. Because now you're not divided up into what you want or don't want and what you have to do to change either one of them. Now you're a single awareness recognizing the activity of a divided mind. You are a single awareness recognizing the activity of the opposites of your own consciousness. And it will, just like it said it did for Buddha when Mara showed up with all the demons and the arrows, and just like all that'll come at you. All these stories, why do you think these stories exist? Because they are representations of a moment in reality with a capital R where an individual went through what it is that you are still waiting to do. So here it comes, let it come. Now, I get it. Some of you are going, yeah, let it come. And then the minute, and you're gone. And that's okay. You have to run through the desert. You've got to do it. You can't not do it. Because you're still an animated creation of an unconscious nature whose identity you think is you, and you're going to run. You can't. But one day you will, if you work and study, and at least challenge it. At least stand there long enough to go, oh my God, I can't stand here any longer. I'm going to make the call. Oh my God, I've got to go do this. Oh my God, I've got to go eat that. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And one day you'll say, oh my God, and God will be there to help you not do what fear tells you to do. And then you'll see. And then in that moment, you will find that field out beyond fear. And then you will get to do that again and again until you finally understand that field out beyond fear already is a part of you. You were given it at birth. The kingdom of heaven is within. So it isn't a task of getting there. It's a task of not taking yourself out of it by listening to a mind dedicated to ensuring you never find the kingdom of heaven. But you can find it when you understand that mind. Got it? Let's take a break. We'll have our dialogue.
Welcome back, everyone. Before we continue on to our discussion period with Guy, I have just a couple of brief announcements as we all get settled both in the room and perhaps you at home as well. The first announcement is just a reminder that this series of free online classes is sponsored by the Life of Learning Foundation. We are located here in Southern Oregon, and for over 30 years now, we have been pursuing this mission of sharing the ideas that Guy talks about with all of those around the world who are interested and wish to understand them as we do. And so we are a nonprofit organization, and that means we depend on the help of others such as yourself. And so as always, we invite you to join us in that mission, to help us if you can. You can go to our website at guyfinley.org/donate, and there you can find a number of different ways that you can help us on a one-time basis or on a recurring basis. And thank you for considering helping us, and a special thanks to those of you who are helping us in this mission. It is much appreciated. The other reminder is that we do videotape, audio record each of these sessions and store them in an archive so that you can look at them and listen to them again online. guyfinley.org/channel will take you to that GoToWebinar archive. And that's a useful resource because this particular talk that Guy gave today on Sunday will be the subject of our Friday evening class at 7 p.m. at the end of the week. And so we students have a chance to work on this topic throughout the week and then share with each other on Friday evenings at 7 p.m. about what we've discovered. So good use of that resource, and I'd encourage you to do that if you're interested as well. All right, I think that's all I have for our regular announcements. Let's go back to the main room and we'll see if Guy is ready to go to our question and answer period, or if he has anything else he wants to add.
No, let's get going.
All right, let's get going. I have 3 written questions already in and 1 hand in the queue. So I'm going to read one of the written questions and then we'll go to Joan in the queue. Here is a question that came in from Carl. Carl says, "Hi, Guy. I'm currently working with your practice stop, drop, endure. And since practicing this practice daily, this lower nature is getting louder and louder, and I'm trying my best not to resist these noises as I realize they are just noises. But oh Lord, they are loud."
Just a couple quick comments. First, I started this talk by telling you that the work is not about giving you answers. It's about awakening you to the fact that the answers you live from are born of the questions you ask yourself. And that you need new questions. And you can't have new questions until you see the old answers are useless. It's impossible. It's impossible. My question always supposes I know the answer. Don't yours? When was the last time you asked yourself a question and there was just this big blank silent wall and 30 years later, well, I'm still waiting. No, sooner or later, through association, the nature of the reaction will attract certain thoughts and feelings connected to it, and they'll spill out, and you go, oh, that's it. That's what I do. That's how I get out of the desert. So that's first. And the second is this, Carl. The nature isn't getting louder and louder. You're just hearing a little better. You're not seeing worse and worse things. You're just starting to see what's always been there. And honestly, we don't know how to deal with that fact. Because I always take myself to be other than what I resist. Yes or no? I always immediately assume that I am other than what I resist. You are not other than what you resist. That I that resists doesn't exist until there's something for it to fear. Sometimes I say things and I wonder if it's just like I'm going to get the flop sweats, like I'm on stage, a comedian, I'm throwing out these great one-liners, and you have to work to understand. Isn't he describing the fact that this wall that I ran away from here has shown up here? And I'm avoiding it there, and not only did I not avoid it, but the more of the same is kind of here. And the more I try to get away, in this instance, by the more I practice stop, drop, and endure, meaning the more I try to stand still and let these things go by, the more I realize I'm incapable of standing still because they're becoming more threatening. Well, of course they're becoming more threatening because you're becoming closer to finding the field that waits outside of them. What do you think it's going to do? Carl, you got me. God, I can't believe it. 300 million zillion human beings, and you're the first one. You got me. That's not how Pharaoh works. Let me try this. Let me try that. Add a dash of this. A little paprika over here. A little ghost pepper over here. That's how it does. Just add a little bit, add a little bit. Oh, it's getting worse, it's getting worse, it's hotter, I can't stand it. The self that can't stand the fear is the fear that can't stand the experience of itself. You start understanding that, then you'll know, Carl, you're in the right place. You literally are in the right place. You just have to experiment, explore a little more. So you'll start to see that the Carl who's trying to get away is the Carl that he's trying to get away from. You just have to see that. The more you see that, the more you will have these experiences where everything passes through you. Do you remember yesterday in our chat, Facebook chat? I said the hardest thing in the world to do is just to do what life asks you to do. Remember I said that? That is the hardest thing to do. Now do you know why? Because life is asking you to see. Life isn't asking you to become something. You can't become any more than God made you. Life isn't asking you to find courage. You don't need courage when you see that your fears are by and large make-believe. The process of an unconscious identity producing for itself a time to come in imagination, and then seeing the imagination in that time evaporate, and with it the identity derived from it. You stand, you watch that, and one day you realize, I have always been free. I just didn't know it because I was always looking at life through the eyes of something that imagines freedom instead of paying the cost of freedom. Was that the title of this talk, or that was last week? Last week, yeah. It all ties together, doesn't it? Anyway, Carl, there you go. On we go.
On we go. We'll go next, Guy, to Joan in the queue. Good morning, Joan.
Good morning, John. Good morning, Guy, and everyone there at class.
Joan, where are you, for God's sake?
Well, it's nice to know you miss me anyways.
I didn't say that. I just said, where are you?
Well, somebody there has. Yes, I know.
Wait, you want me to ask who misses Joan? Oh my God, that wasn't the answer I was expecting.
So, Guy, thank you so much for this talk. It was just perfect for me. You know, as you and everyone there knows, I made a big move out of state.
You did?
And yeah, yes, I did. And, you know, I've been going through so many fears, you know, just this mind, Joan's mind, you know. I go through one fear and get a little relief from it and feel a little free, and then another fear pops up. So that shows me it's all one fear. It's not anything I can blame outside of me. It's in this consciousness, within me.
Yes.
And I know I have to keep going through these fears for necessity. It's always the fear of the unknown, what my imagination is telling me in this dialogue, what's going to happen and all this. It's all a bunch of hogwash.
Yes, it is.
But I believe it,
Yeah, you said it, and you said it well. I'll just strengthen it. For the longest time, this nature that is the father of fear believes the necessity is to escape the fear. But as I see it can't be done, the new necessity is to stand there, explore it, and let it go by. Then I have a new necessity, and the need for that new understanding cannot be denied. That's the beauty of it. God pushes the wish inside of you for you to know this indwelling light in which the shadow of fear does not, the field out beyond fear, where fear cannot dwell. But the only way you enter into that is by not running, watching. Anyway, Joni, Patricia's actually online, and your sister says hello, and I say hello to my wife and my sister-in-law, wherever you are.
Okay, thank you, Guy. I know I just have to work to see everything more fully.
Okay,
thank
Joni.
you.
Be well.
You too.
All right, Guy, I'm coming back on. Here is our next written question. It comes from Annette. Annette says, where does our value system and core beliefs come into play here? If we have a mission statement, can that cause fear if the people closest to us are on a different path?
Annette, I like the question because it's in earnest. But now I must answer it in earnest. The two great commandments, that you should love Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind, and that you should love your neighbor as yourself. Those aren't creations of humanity. Those are the full and final set of values. That there should be something that I hold in reverence without having to think about it or give it a name. That there is a wisdom that I long for with all my heart, soul, and mind, because I've seen the folly of my own intelligence. And if I had that wisdom, I couldn't act against myself, and I couldn't act against any other human being. So that the value begins with love and it ends there. And I'm not taught that. I'm taught that the value is to appear loving. The value is to act as if I have a God that I place before all of the things until all of the things become for that God when I'm in fear. So the answer, Annette, is that there is a value system, but it's not of man-made. It's not made of man. And the reason the world is this hideous, corrupt, conflicted place that it is today is because of the values of human beings that have taken and twisted the true values, made them serve himself. Real values do not serve the individual, they serve the whole. And if my mission statement is based on a derivative of my imagined values, then yes, Annette, my mission statement is filled with suffering, because it is the creation of a divided mind trying to prove itself that it is what it imagines itself to be. So I don't need a mission statement. You might at work. Look, we have a foundation. We don't have mission statements in quotes, although the government said we had to have one, so we made one. A business might have a mission statement, but you know what the business mission statements are. Profit first, people last, but we won't write it that way. We'll just lie. People first, security for everyone's safety, then profits, until the shareholders get a hold of it. I'm not going to go further with that. You get the idea, Annette. I like the question. Let's go on.
All right, Guy, we'll go next to Cher in our queue. So Cher, I've unmuted you. Good morning. Unmute yourself now.
Well, good morning. It's good afternoon for me.
Good. Hi, Sharon.
Or good evening, whoever is listening, just as you say, Guy.
Good.
Um, I'm just almost speechless. I'm so grateful for all your talks. And they really, truly speak to me, Guy. They tell my story, I feel. And it's just a beautiful walking
Yes. It's our,
with you all.
it's our story, Sharon. That's
Yes.
that's the beauty of it. It's not your story. It's not Debbie's story.
Yes.
It's our story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So true. So true.
Good.
And so much comes up
Yes.
for me through this talk, just the guest house by room, walking into my fear and bringing out the welcome mat, as I say.
Yeah.
Just real. Sorry, Guy, were you going to say something?
Oh, no, Sharon. I'm just agreeing with you.
Okay. Anyway, stop, drop, and endure is beautiful. What also is very helpful, has been helpful. So much has been helpful. It's just, as the student is ready, the teachers appear, and I call you a teacher to me.
Very well.
And truly, thank you, God.
You're welcome, Sharon.
Bless
You're
you,
welcome.
God bless you.
Stay the path.
Yeah.
On we go.
Yes, so rain also comes up for me by Tara Brock, recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture.
I like that too.
Anyway, yes, so much has been helpful for me to bring me to where I am.
Yes.
And to see that I love the circle, and here I was in my fear, and how I've seen so many not here today, but never did live out of the circle. They stayed in the circle.
Yes. Not anymore.
And,
Not anymore. We're going to work. Go to work.
you got her.
All
Keep
right.
working.
Give me your report.
I'm going to
Okay.
stay close,
Yes.
and I love you all, and thank you.
Bye.
All right, Guy, I'm going to come back on. I have 3 written questions, and we have another hand in the queue, so I'll pick one of our next written questions. This comes from Jill on Facebook, and she says, "Hi, Guy. Recently, I had to go to the bank at the last minute and thought I was smart and took a shortcut, only to discover the road was closed. Jill became furious, and at the same time, I yelled, 'Get out of my house!' And I asked, is there good anger?"
I would assume that the moment of fury and yelling, "Get out of my house," is a reference to Christ turning over the money changer tables. I would assume that. Otherwise, I don't know what "get out of my house" would mean. And if it's related to that idea, you must be very careful not to imagine that your fury at being denied is the same thing as what Christ exhibited when he turned over those tables. I think that anger that appears following the mind analyzing a moment, which it does in a split second, that anger is always a form of buffer. It always makes the appearance seem real, that this anger I'm feeling towards the conditions is different than the consciousness that was so full of anticipation, getting there, getting it done, and having it over that fast, so that I can't see that pressure is released in an unconscious fashion because the opposites are there, and boom, there's this explosion, and then out comes this pressure. Do you understand that, everybody? Out comes the release. Our work is not to release the opposites. Our work is not to release the opposites, but to be the observing awareness of the energy that's created when they appear, so that we can step into that awareness and use that energy for the observation it's intended to produce. Then that anger, in quotes, becomes useful. Otherwise, it's always useless. On we go.
We'll go next to Fiona in the queue. Guy. Hello, Fiona.
Hi, John. Hello, Guy. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Fiona.
Hi there. So it's incredible how I can have a great revelation and then be totally consumed by all the kind of negativity that just swamps in every angle. And just being there to see it all can sometimes just make me feel kind of really empty, almost quite sick, a bit shaky, just being in it. And, you know, just watching it all and, you know, tearful even at times. It's pretty amazing how it can change, you know, from
Can I tell you
one moment to the next.
Can I tell you a true story?
Yeah.
I don't know when it was. I guess it was over 20 years ago, 25 years ago. No, it's more than that. God, I'm thinking, oh my God. A long, long, long time ago. I was in my early 20s. I had read certain things and was drawn, and I took off to go around the world and to throw myself at the feet of saints and gurus that I thought maybe they could, little Shaktipat, they would open me up and suddenly I would be, I'd get there, which sounded great. I just go to India, wake up. So long story short, at one point I was getting ready to see this individual that I had read some things of, and his words were true, but he had fallen. And by this grace of God, when I was getting ready to walk into this place that it felt terrible, even on the outside, this old Indian sadhu, a sadhu wears a loincloth and covered in ash, an old sadhu with a flute under his arm, big white beard, long hair. He grabs my arm, scared the bejeebies out of me, and he pulled me away from the entrance to that ashram. And as we're walking away, I'm flabbergasted. I don't know what to say. And in perfect English, he says to me, honey on the tongue, poison in the heart. Perfect English. Honey on the tongue, poison in the heart. I thought, oh my God, because I already suspected that, having been there for a day, not going in, just wandering around. And I spent about 10 days with him. And at one point, Fiona, this is the story while I'm telling you, we were talking about certain things connected to this work, which I didn't even know existed in its form at that time. I hadn't even met Mr. Howard. But at one point he could see certain things about me, it was obvious. And he said to me something like this. He said, you know, the journey is unending. The journey is unending. He said, and along the way, he said, you're going to see all these beautiful flowers. Then he said, but never stop and pick them. And the Indians do this quite a bit, don't they? Never stop and pick them. Never stop and pick them. Fiona, the only reason that these moments that are filled with trepidation and all the reasons that we feel when we've had this tremendous insight, one day, Fiona, and you may be experiencing some of this now, we're meant to have, I'm in 4, 5, 6, 7 major epiphanies a day. And I think that's just the beginning. I think life is an epiphany. I think we're just on the wrong side of the wall. But the reason that they disturb me when they're the epiphanies I don't want is because I picked a flower. I just didn't see I did it. I adapted myself to some identity. I thought about myself being a certain way. I felt about myself as having understood something. I picked a flower. Why is that picking a flower? Because now there's me and what I know. And the only thing that bothers me is when something challenges what I know. That's called fear. So those moments that seem to be the worst are actually the best. Because it allows you to see that along the way, you're still going, but you stopped, you made a camp, you picked flowers, and you're sitting there like Ferdinand the Bull, sniffing them in. And that's a lot of bull. You get it?
Yes, very good, very encouraging. Thank you so much. It's what I need.
I always love hearing your name and talking to you. See you later.
Bye. Bye.
All right, Guy, I'm coming on. I have 2 written questions left, no hands in the queue at present. So here's the first of the 2 questions. It comes in from George. George says, "Hi, Guy. About 1 month ago, a friend who was in his 60s and steeped in seeking freedom took his own life. I'm not sure what to make of this. Did he escape from the desert? I thank you for your insight."
No, he may have condemned himself to walking through it forever. I'm not the judge of these things. Ego believes it can kill ego. All it can do is perpetuate itself. And I would venture softly for a split second, but I will not answer any questions about this, into a certain unknown territory where I can tell you what you don't free yourself from here, you don't escape when you leave this body. End of story. On we go.
All right, Guy, here is the last written question.
Why do you think the angels say it is a blessing to be a human being, which is in all scripture? Why do you think that's true, east and west? Because in a body, in a world of opposites, you can learn to align yourself with a will that isn't generated by the opposites, but that generates them. So that thy will becomes my will, and when thy will becomes my will, I'm no longer divided. I'm no longer dealing with all these desert moments and the creatures in them, because they're all an aspect of a mind asleep to itself. This is the real value of enlightenment. Now we can go on, John. Last one for the day.
All right, Guy, here's the last one. Then we can go to our students in the room if they wish. This question came in from Mary. Mary asks, during situations where solutions need to be found in a specific time frame, how do you suggest one handles such a situation? There's an urgency,
Yes.
the importance for the solution. Otherwise, the consequences roll in. Any insights to see the situations in the best possible way would be welcome.
Yeah. Do you remember growing up? I do. They had this thing that was called the Invisible Man when you were a kid. It was a plastic body. You know, it was about yo big and had everything inside of it. You could look inside this body. It was the coolest thing. I just loved it. It's called the Invisible Man. So a question like this is like the Invisible Man, because there's all of these organs and bone, all of these systems, everything connected. So you can go here and talk about this one system, but the hip bone's connected to the knee bone, the neck bone connected to the, it's all connected, Mary. So on one hand, here I am. Let me read this first part. I run a foundation. You wouldn't believe the disasters that roll through here for such a small group of people. Trying to, of course, we're global and we try to help the world, but we're all the time, explosion here, explosion there. This goes to hell in a handbasket. And then when that happens, you know what happens if mama ain't happy, so we have to make all the decisions, right, Kate? Right, Chrissy? Yeah. Stuff's got to get done. Now, as a rule, if Chris is there, it's got to get done now. Yeah, no, doesn't matter what it costs. Just do it. I'll pay half. God love her. But that's the way it is, because there are situations that require instantaneous solutions. So that's the first answer. But what does a practical solution have to do with the pain of fear? Please, I was actually thinking about this at great length yesterday. How come if something has to be done, where is it written that something has to be done? So I need to be negative so I ensure it gets done. If I'm negative, what gets done is my goose. So that's why I say it's an invisible body. It's all these connections. Yeah, handle it. Who says don't handle it? Who handles it is the question. What handles it is the question. And you can be sure as shooting. That's a very old expression from the 1800s in the Wild West. You can be sure as shooting that if you're anxious and negative and demanding, that whatever you're doing that's going to handle that, may get that handled, but it is not going to put a handle on that part of you that will continue to meet situations like that and come out of it exactly the same as you went into it. And with that, we close this part, but students are welcome to come up and speak. We have a dialogue sometimes. You're welcome to stay, and I encourage you to do so. Anybody coming up? Chris is coming up right away.
Hello, I'm Chris. So in the morning when I wake up, one of the first things I do is I go around and open up all the windows in the house to cool down the house in the summertime like it is now. And as I was coming down the stairs this morning, I remembered Guy's talk yesterday. One of the key points was, he said, and he just brought it up again, the hardest thing to do is to do what life is asking you to do right now. And as I was coming down the stairs, I knew I didn't have to think about anything. You know, the mind always wants to be filled with something, a made-up problem, anything to occupy itself.
It wants a wall to get past so it can head there and then be free when it gets on the other side of something that doesn't even exist in that moment, save for imagination.
Right, and it values everything, and opening up a window, it has no value to that mind.
Correct.
But I remembered what Guy said yesterday, and I knew the only thing I had to do was what life was asking me to do in that moment, which was to open up the windows. And it had no more or no less value than anything else that I did that day, except for if I could do it consciously. The mind, it only values its fear. It only values its worry. It only values, this nature does everything to try to control its environment. And so it's always planning, what if this happens? And all of that takes you out of the moment. All that's necessary is to know that I'm standing here in this moment trying to express a little something that I saw this morning. Nothing else matters, and there is nothing to plan for if I'm just doing what life is asking me to do right now.
So what Chris is alluding to here, you've heard it before, but here's a living example. You've heard the expression, the monk is asked, well, you know, what did you do before you awakened? I used to chop wood and carry water. And now that you've awakened, what do you do? Chop wood and carry water. Now you get some of that. Still doing the same things, but another nature is doing it. So beautiful. Come on.
Hello, I'm Ellen. First of all, from your talk, there's a new song. First there is an oasis, then there's no oasis, and then there's an oasis.
That's exactly right.
I don't think I said I'm Ellen. I am. I did? Oh, see, I have no memory. First there is an Ellen, then there is no Ellen.
Oh, Father, please.
I'll be here all week. So how many times have we heard Guy say, God knows what you need before you ask him, and you are given every moment exactly what you need. But Ellen would love to live that way. That's being in the field. But she always thinks she has to save herself. And in doing that, she always creates the things she fears and the solutions which run her more into the wall. I don't know, like, when is it going to stop? But these are the exercises to just see. Life is just asking us to see that she's always creating that.
I have to be involved with the moment to understand it. I cannot be involved with anything that I resist, because then I'm involved with the consciousness that has the fear. This is hands-on. I've always said this, truth is a full contact sport. If you don't think it's full contact, you're in the wrong field. Full contact sport. I have to experiment. If I'm not experimenting, I'm not exploring. If I'm not exploring, I'm not discovering. If I'm not discovering, I'm in the hands of something that has delivered me into the hands of fear.
Right. And
Go.
can I say?
I don't mean go, I mean go.
Oh, go.
Get thee to a nunnery.
Chris talked about what she sees in the morning. Okay, something I've seen in the morning for years is that the minute I wake up, I get this flash of fear. Yeah. It's probably just cortisol or something, but it's like there's always that first awareness is of the fear. And for years, she always tried to think of what's going to happen this day. Why am I having this fear? And trying to give a reason for it, and then how am I going to handle this? And because of what you've been teaching, I've begun to be able to see that moment of fear and not give it a name and just watch it. And when I don't give it a name, it always passes.
Yes, I don't know who the one was that said it in this line of questions. It was Carl who said, everything's getting louder and louder the more I work. You want to really work with that? You feel that when you open your eyes? Because it's mechanical. The machine does not quit just because you catch on to it. Sit up in your bed immediately, put your feet on the floor, become aware of them there, and then do nothing other than be present to the fear. Watch what it says, how it's useless to sit there, how this doesn't work, you're not seeing anything new, or how it'll start to rag on about all the different real things that have to be done. Watch it until it begins to slow down. Then you get up and go do what you want to do. But you involve yourself in it directly that way, Ellen. You'll gain immense understanding.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Come on up, Eric.
Good morning. My name is Eric. And the real spiritual life is just too simple for even words to describe. And it's because it's already done. Because we're actually a creation. And a creation first, and then a creator. And I remember when I got here 20 years ago, and I was in a panic. I was just outright panicked, trying to figure it all out, you know. And I remember we were out here in a circle on a Saturday after lunch, and I asked some question, and Guy took off his hat and threw it into the center of the circle and said, "Go pick up that hat and bring it back to me." And I did it. And then I sat back down, and then he said, "Which hand did you pick up the hat with and hand it back to me with?" And I guessed the right answer. But I didn't really know. I wasn't really aware that which hand I had picked it up with. And the whole point is, I mean, gosh, it's hard to say.
You're saying it.
That's how simple it is. Wherever I am, that's where God's circled on the map for me. The mind is trying to figure it out. I'm getting a little lost here, but yeah, I'll stop there.
She snuck up on me.
Hi, I'm Debbie. Thank you for this talk, Guy, as I thank you for everyone. And thank you for what you said to Ellen, because I go through the same thing in the morning, the fear. And I've noticed that if I just get up and it's not to do things. That's what I need to do, is sit there and just feel it.
Make it your first meditation. Only needs to be 2, 3, 5 minutes until you have seen something. Don't try to make it more than that. Then it becomes faked, forced. What do I see? The more you do that, the more you'll have those moments everywhere you go. You'll understand what a living meditation is.
Yes, you said something the other day, stillness is the first action of truth, and I'm really focused on that, and it really relates to the first action is remember yourself, and the last action is to remember yourself. So stillness, folks, pausing, getting into patience, living within patience when we're presented with moments. And so I've had a challenge just recently. There's been a possibility of doing something in my life. And the thing that Guy said just a little while ago about anxiety and something demanding, to not do anything from that part of you. And there's been something like that, wanting to have this possibility come true. And I've got to let the whole thing go. There's been something in me wanting to work it all out and get it done and do this and do that, and
it's painful.
It's been painful, but the longer I've been doing this work, the more I know that we're being brought lessons in every single moment, and that's the real beauty of it all.
Here comes real trouble.
From what Debbie and
Hello, my name is.
hello, my name is Namita. From what Debbie shared, I remembered the moment that I woke up this morning, and in front of my bed there's a mirror, and I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, oh my God. And then I was like, okay, the judgment started, and then I watched my mind judge myself for a little bit, and then I was like, just look, and I just looked at myself in the mirror, and when I really looked at that image, I was like, it's fine, like it's exactly what it needs to be, nothing less, nothing more, and it's just perfect the way it is. And then I suddenly realized that all my questions that I asked Guy or anybody have been to serve this image of Namita. And everything has been for her spiritual growth, or for her stupid things that she wants to do in life to help others when she doesn't even know who she is. So for me, I just realized that I have not touched anything spiritual at all.
No, you have touched something spiritual. or more accurately, something spiritual has touched you now. You now know something about Namita and her spiritual life. You know what you didn't know before. That's everything.
That's it.
All right, Big T, you'll be the last.
Good morning. My name is Tony, and I want to get the name out of the way. The Pope's Russell Crowe stars in this movie. We just watched it last night. The Pope's what do you call it when you exorcist? Okay.
The Pope's Exorcist.
Yes. Yeah. And movies like that, I really don't like. You know, with the gore and the thing. I really don't like that. I've never liked them, but. So what I do is I focus on the words, right? And it was really interesting. As a matter of fact, his character in the movie last night kind of reminds me of you, because sometimes you laugh, you say something, and then you laugh about it, and I'm sitting in my chair going, what the heck's funny about that, you know? But you find humor in certain things that takes me a while to catch the humor, okay? And this character in this movie was like that. I mean, he's going in to face demons, right? Possessions, people that are possessed. And he's got another priest with him, and he's joking about it to a certain extent. But some of the things that were said in that script were pretty impactful. He turns to the young priest because this demon, this possessed whatever human being, was yelling out things about their past, their fears, things they've done in their past, and the priest was puzzled. How does he know that? How does that demon know that about us? And he turns, Russell Crowe turns to him and says, you know why he's throwing those things out at us? Do you know why? And he guesses something and he says, it's to distract us. It's just to distract you. Because ultimately, and there was a moment that kind of really accentuated this, all the lights went out in the room. The demon thing just blew some energy and all the lights went out. And you're sitting there watching this in the dark, and I'm wondering, now what? And Russell Crowe just goes, click. He lit the lighter and lights one light in the room and changes the whole attitude. You feel it in yourself. It was visceral. But it reminded me, and this talk today reminded me, that all of the fears, all of the things that we deal with constantly are nothing more than distractions. They distract us from keeping our eye on what's important.
Correct.
That everything, all fears still, they're under the light. They're under goodness, if you will.
Well, you have your assignment for the next 82 lifetimes. You know what you have to do. Get properly involved in the moment. And the proper involvement is not resisting and it's not insisting. It's observing the consciousness responsible for the conditions that it wants to run from or run to. That's it. Learn. And we'll see what we've learned next Wednesday. I'll see you next Wednesday online. Bye.